Hello, this is James, and today we're talking about the new Parshath counter fairy support that is coming in Lords of the Shining. In this video, we're going to talk about a potential deck list that you can just build as soon as you get your Lords of the Shining new cards. We're going to talk about some skills, some side decks. Basically, the purpose of these videos is to make it much easier for you. Like, you don't have to experiment and mess around and search for a bunch of things. Here's something that you can try as soon as you get your Lords of the Shining box. You know, it's not meta tested, obviously. It's just something that'll let you begin to build counter fairies, and then you can do what you want. We have a potential deck list. We have side deck options. We have skills. We have all kinds of things, and we're going to talk about all of the new Parshath cards, beginning with in this deck, we have old counter fairies, we have new counter fairies. I will talk about the new counter fairies cards that I am most interested in, and then later we'll talk about the ones that I'm not as interested in. But I don't want you to get confused with those ones. So we're just going to start with the ones that I've included in the prototype deck. We have Minerva, Scholar of the Sky. Each time a counter trap card is activated immediately after it resolves, this card gains 500 attack, and if it does, and Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, add one counter trap with a different name from your GY to your hand. Basically like Bountiful Artemis, but the extra 500 attack makes Minerva more of a threat, which counter fairies sorely need. When we first had counter fairies, the way everyone just played around them was you just didn't activate anything. And then you have a 1600 attack point Meltiel. Well, I have a 1700 attack point or 1800 attack point Dristan. I just attack over Meltiel and destroy it, and you can't activate anything because I haven't activated anything. So with Minerva gaining the attack points, making them more of a threat, that's the secondary condition of counter fairies, right? You have to worry about forcing your opponent to activate if they just decide not to activate. Power Angel Valkyria, also coming from Lord of the Shining. If you negate the activation of a spell, trap card, or monster effect, add one light fairy monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. So the Power Angel lets you fix your hands, and these are fine, but the real special sauce of counter fairies is coming in the back row. So we are getting Sanctum of Parshat. This card's name becomes Sanctuary in the Sky while on the field or in the GY. So you don't necessarily have to have Sanctuary in the Sky for Minerva. For Divine P, you can just have Sanctum of the Parshath. Fairy monsters on the field gain 300 attack and defense. Set spells and traps cannot be targeted by or destroyed by card effects. So no Cosmic Cyclone, no XX Saber Hunley board clear. Once per turn, you can target a total of 3 fairy monsters or counter traps with different names in your GY. Place them on top of your deck in any order. So that lets you recycle, and you're not placing them in your deck and shuffling. You get to put exactly what you want on top of your deck. That's very nice, too. We're also getting Rebirth of Parshat. When a spell trap card or monster effect is activated, reveal one counter trap in your hand, then discard one card. Pay 1,000 LP, negate the activation, and if you do, shuffle that card in the deck. Then you can special summon one Parshat monster from your deck or extra deck. So that Shien does not go to the graveyard to become materials for an Inishi. That the Vampire's card doesn't go back to doesn't become vampire stuff. It gets shuffled back into the deck. That's like the strongest removal ever. Actually, let's touch on the one counter fairy Parshat card I didn't include, which is Sacred Arch Air Knight Parshath. So maybe you could get this off of Rebirth of Parshat, but this guy's kind of a brick. Like, if you're not getting him off of Rebirth of Parshat, you have to do a counter trap and then banish 2 other fairy monsters from your hand, field, or graveyard. So he's kind of a pain in the neck to get together. So I feel like what you want to be special summoning for free off of your Rebirth of Parshath is a Venging Knight Parshath. So I think this is a UR ticket. Once per turn, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Change that target's battle position. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. So he doesn't get the draw or search effects of the other Parshath monsters, but since he's in the extra deck, he's not taking up slots and he's not eating up your consistency. So for this prototype deck, I would use, these cards and an extra deck, a Venging Knight Parshath. And then also a new card is going to be Wiretap. When a trap card is activated, negate the activation, and if you do, shuffle that card back into your deck. This is a super rare out of the new box, but it's a really good counter trap, so it has a natural home in counter fairies. Now, The reason that we have both Sanctuary in the Sky and Sanctum of Parshath is because Sanctuary in the Sky is searchable. You have these Zeratius, these have 2100 attack points. These can force your opponent to activate things that let you activate your counter traps, get your counter fairies effects, and then also you can discard them to search for Sanctuary in the Sky. Sanctum of Parshath is not searchable. That's why we have both. For our old monsters, Meltiel, Zeratius searches. Meltiel, each time a counter track is activated immediately after it resolves, gain 1000 LP, and if you do, the Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field. Destroy one card your opponent controls. Meltiel is giving good removal, but we're only running her at 2 because she's pretty weak. Like, 1600 attack points is not forcing anybody to activate anything. Divine P, also from the Superb Tea event. When a spell, trap card, or monster effect is activated while Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So, this is just really good. Counter fairies effect negate basically anything that you want. And then you could do Wall of Disruption, you could do Power of the Guardians, you could do Mirror Wall, like just anything that's forcing your opponent to, like, that's making them activate stuff that then lets you activate the counter traps. You need a little bit of that in your deck in order to be able to make the big plays off of your counter trap. Now, for our side deck, we have our Parshath monsters. Any of these can be special summoned off of Rebirth of Parshat, but I think that Venging Knight of Parshat in the extra deck is good for consistency purposes. We have Bountiful Artemis. If you don't have Meltiel, you can use Bountiful Artemis, but I feel like Minerva is an upgraded version. And then our big boys, we have Vandalgian, and I want to say Volantis, but it's Voltanus. When you activate a counter trap, you can special summon them, and you can destroy things depending on what you activated. These are really good. Maybe run them at 1, but they do eat into your consistency. Like if you top deck these, and your opponent is not activating anything, you're going to be unhappy. Cards from the Sky. I feel like you actually don't really need cards from the Sky, but it's I want to talk about it. So banish one light fairy monster in your hand, and if you do, draw 2 cards. You cannot special summon or conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. So maybe you want that extra draw power in your counter fairies. But the reason I want to talk about this is a card that James would just read and say, oh, this is terrible, don't play this. Because you can't special summon and you give up your battle phase. Well, counter fairies are not special summoning on your turn. And also, you don't really want to do battle phase unless you have a clear attack, right? So what you want to do, you do cards from the Sky, you normal summon, you draw into counter traps, and then you just wait. So that's why cards from the Sky works in counter fairies, and you may or may not choose to run it. Ties of the Brethren, get out your level 4 boys, get your Meltiel, and then you can get Minerva, Power Angel, Valkyria. Very nice. And then you can also just side deck any counter trap that you care to add. So Dark Bribe. When your opponent activates a spell trap card, your opponent draws 1 card, also negate the spell trap activation. If you do, destroy it. So this gives your opponent an extra card, but that's fine. That's just more stuff for you to negate. Debunk, when a monster effect is activated in the hand or GY, negate the activation. And if you do, banish it for you, Bell. Face Off, when a spell trap card or monster effect is activated during the damage step, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. This is for Despots and also for Mirror Walls. I don't really think that you would run Face Off over something like Wiretap or Divine Punishment, but it's a good option. Magic Drain is actually a card that I don't want you to pick. Now, this is not a problem for most people because they don't have this ultra rare that's really, really old. But when an opponent activates a spell card, they can discard a spell card and negate this card's effect. So even though this is a counter trap, your opponent has the option to not resolve it, and that's not what we want to do with counter fairies. With counter fairies, we need the counter trap to resolve, and then we can get the counter fairy, extra juju. We can also do Solemn Scolding, really expensive, really good, and Ultimate Providence, also expensive, also good. Finally, I want to talk about some good skills. Not with this deck, but possibly with other decks. You could use the balance skill if you added more spells. But you know what? I really want to have all the extra counter traps for Rebirth of Parshath. I want to get that free. Avenging Knight Parshath. I think that's really strong. Dual Standby. Dual Standby, actually similar to what I said about Dark Bribe. So with Dual Standby, you get an extra card, your opponent gets an extra card. but that's just more things for you to negate. And then the counter fairies make that efficient because, you know, you negate that card, and then Meltiel destroys the card, and then the dual standby advantage that you gave to your opponent is negated. And then Fairy Smile, gain up the life points, stay in the duel forever. And also, you know, if you want to do the farm, if you want to farm your opponents with the less consistent Neo Parshath off of, again, Rebirth of Parshat. Are we getting the message here? Rebirth of Parshat is really dope. Yeah, so Fairy Smile, really, really strong. And also, consider Endless Trap Hell if you don't want to run Sanctum of Parshath and just want to run full counter trap. So, like, instead of 2 Wall of D, like, do 2 Mirror Wall and 2 Wall of D, and then cut the Sanctum of Parshath, and you search the Sanctuary in the Sky with Zeradius, Herald of Heaven. So, that is a brief introduction to Counter Fairies. I hope that it is helpful to you, and if you're new, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching.